terminology is not something new, although it would have hit anybody, many of the people as a new terminology. But it was first referred in a publication called Who Cares Wins in 2005. And that was the publication which the UN brought out to the investors, saying that whoever cares on these three, E, S, and G, would win on the long term. So that was the kind of underlying message in that publication. But post that, I think the terminology laid low, and terminologies like sustainability and corporate responsibility and all those kind of things were more often used. But I kind of used Google Trends to dig up the use of these terminologies and do a comparison. 2018 is when ESG started picking up. And today, ESG has surpassed the use of sustainability. Every other kind of nomenclature, it has kind of surpassed. So what happened in 2018? So I think the big shift, I would say, was from the big, investors. It was Larry Fink's letter. I think that was the critical element of this uprise. And then State Street, and then World Economic Forum, the stakeholder, capitalisms, and all those kind of things. So I think those were the trends which kind of really pushed this particular thing. But as Namita said, 2020 has been a kind of a very critical year to accelerate this. I call this as an ESG 2.0, because you had the 1.0, which is from 2005 to about 2018-19. And what you have is the 2.0, because 2.0 is a little different when money starts chasing ESG. Earlier to that, it was more about goodwill, reputation, all those kind of things. But, the real money started chasing, then the scenario changes. You have a different perspective. So I think this is the ESG 2.0. And second is also the problem is that people suddenly start realizing that the risks are precipitating. You had the first so-called climate change related bankruptcy. And so I think those are some of the kind of things which kind of push us. And then, of course, the pandemic. The pandemic makes you realize what can be a global impact. And that fears drives many things. At least for the pandemic, you have a vaccine. But for climate change, I don't think you will have a vaccine. So I think those would be the kind of critical things which kind of changes the dimension into a different. And so money started flowing. You have more mutual funds. You have more. But even today, the reality is that I would say, it's still lazy investing. That would be the term I would use, because if you really start analyzing many of these mutual funds and all, almost 50-55% of them is IT industry and banking. Now, that's not ESG. You pick what is convenient, is lazy investing. So I think it's kind of yes, early days. Let's give that leeway, early days. And the other problem is, there are, everybody wants to kind of make their presence felt in a situation like this. That's also you have more ESG ratings, you have more ESG standards. You have everybody coming out with their own disclosure requirements. You have countries coming out with their own disclosure requirements. And as Namita mentioned about the Sustainable Finance Act, I am part of that task group. So I can also say that EU has a separate taxonomy. You have Singapore coming out with something, South Africa came out, and we are also coming out with our taxonomy. So I think it's more like the IFRS and Ind AS. So we Indianize most of the things, and even on the reporting side, we have the BRSR. Yes, it's a progression from what we had on the business responsibility reporting, and it kind of brings out some of the international requirements now into the forefront, and we definitely would see a higher level of disclosure. My only caution is that, again, I would say, the quantity of disclosures is different to the quality of the disclosure. And as a person who has been involved in, doing assurance around some of these data, I can tell you the data is never comparable. See, there are two schools of thought. One is, as Jigar mentioned, the Europe is a little more advanced school of thought, which is a binary that you only finance or you call anything as sustainable finance under the sustainable finance taxonomy as only clean things. Now, being part of the task force in India, it's kind of a little tough for us, not considering the transition, because many of our organizations and they will undergo a transition, and where is that finance going to be? So it's kind of a tough road for us to take that EU journey. Okay, now, but the problem here is that the moment you say, people use this term just transition, and I say the word just, please use it as adjective just, not the other way around, because it becomes very, then the transition becomes incremental, and anything and everything become transition. So I think there is a bit of a, what I can say, a clarity or a clear path we have to take when we talk about this sustainable finance or green finance. Like every color, you can say even the green has 50 shades. And so there would be those shades which you would have to kind of consider as well. But one thing I'll tell you is that slowly, it's really slow, but what is happening is that people are realizing the true cost economics in this. Okay. Because slowly the so-called intangibles are becoming tangibles. So you have a kind of a valuations around natural capital. You heard the Supreme Court come out with what is the value of a tree and all those kind of things. So I think slowly you have the valuations coming in the natural capital, valuations coming in the social capital as well. Now those things, once it comes, what happens is that the so-called intangibles become tangible, and then you are able to kind of judge what is the true cost economics, which is not something new. I mean, if you really look at it, as early as 1920, Arthur Pigou came out with the Pigovian tax in UK, and which is nothing but a kind of a, reducing the externality cost by the business. That's what the Pigovian economics was about as well. So I think the slow movement, which if it can be fast-paced, that would aid towards better kind of decision making in this green financing. But one more dimension which Namita mentioned, I would like to kind of expand it with a bit of with an example, is that when you're financing green also, you need a different lens. I did this kind of a discussion with many fleet owners on the EV side. And the fleet owners, very simple, they said that we are all ready. I mean, electric vehicles, we are ready to kind of change our fleet into electric vehicles. Where is the problem? The problem is that there is not even a single lender who has a differentiated product here. Everybody knows that, I mean, Tesla is giving you a warranty to go to the moon and come back, which means that the maintenance as well as the life of the vehicle is higher. Now, why would you apply the same tenure of a diesel vehicle to an electric vehicle and say you have to pay the loan in this time? Who is giving a tenure difference? So each one of these green investments which we are looking into need to be looked into with a different lens, and that requires knowledge about that sector. That requires a deep understanding about the, as I said, the true cost economics or some of those kind of things to really come out with those different. I think that until unless that differentiation happens, green financing, as Colonel Sir mentioned, is that today most of the interesting or all the case studies on impact investing, sir, is impact plus more than conventional returns. Only those make case studies of impact investing. Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
So I think we will remain over there. So, yeah. Here, in terms of the carbon pricing, I think there are two distinct dimensions which people need to understand, and people literally cross over between these two very rapidly. One is what we call as the offset pricing, which is around the Article 6, which is around all. That's a completely a little different in the sense that why the international border, but even today, even without Article 6, bilaterally it is getting traded. I mean, I know that in India the Scandinavians are buying. So that way there is something which is happening over there. The other one is a internal carbon price, which is a little different, which is around your business risk. Let us look at it. Today, a refinery column, when crude is pumped into it, there are more than 200 things which you bring it out. And the petrol and diesel are the cash cows. Now, tomorrow into the future, if the cash cows volume is reducing, and if your other chemicals you are forced to produce more, and if you don't have the market, what is going to be the economic models? Looking into that, if I want to make some investments right now, a capital investment right now, can I factor the price of carbon to overcome, the risk factoring part of it? That's a different economic model. Okay, so I think the of course over a period of time there will be a kind of a level playing field between both these streams would happen at an international level. But today, if you really look at it, these are two very distinct. The way in which we go ahead and calculate the internal carbon pricing for a company is completely different.